In March 2020, we remade our original Dragonite video and told you about how great Dragonite was actually. Now, rather than unnecessarily remake that remake, we will instead update you on how Dragonite has performed in the most recent 2 generations, just like we did with Scizor. And also, as with Scizor, we will recap the generations of Dragonites from the remake video, Gens 1 through 7, noting any new developments that may have sprung up in the time since. We know Dragonite was great, but today we're asking, how great is Dragonite now actually? And speaking of dragons, you ever wanted to play a turn-based game except with only the dragon type? Well, now you can with the sponsor of this video, Dragon Mania Legends by Gameloft. Dragon Mania Legends is a mobile game where you can, well, what else? Raise a team of legendary dragons and battle your way through the story in turn-based combat. With more than 1,000 dragons to collect, you'll have plenty of fun feeding, petting, and training your dragons. You can even mix and match them by breeding them to create new dragons with a seemingly endless amount of mating combinations. There's even type advantages, and I sure hope you know them because you'll need them to defeat the Vikings dragons and save Dragolandia. Build your habitats and farms on your own archipelago to raise the ultimate dragon team. So if you want to play a sick dragon type mobile game and also support the channel to help us produce more content, we've got an exclusive welcome package for you if you use our code FALLSWIPE to download the game. You'll get 100k gold, 50k food, and the dragon we chose to give away for our welcome package, the Haunted Armor Dragon, because it reminds us of a certain mon. Download Dragon Mania Legends for free on iOS, Google Play, or the Windows Store. And thank you Gameloft for sponsoring this video. And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. In RBY, Dragonite was a rare but incredibly dangerous pick, wrapping everything in sight. That's wrapping with a W, not wrapping as in D-Knight dropping bars, as great as that would be. In Gen 1, wrap was basically an automatic flinch move, and playing around it was a horrifying mixture of playing for misses on the right and trying to PP stall it. If it was basically flinching, couldn't you outspeed it? Well, no, since Dragonite ran agility, outspeeding everything even if it was paralyzed, thanks to another Gen 1 mechanic. And yet another Gen 1 mechanic Dragonite abused perfectly was Hyper Beam not recharging if it got a KO, with its monstrous attack stat. This gave it an amazing finishing move. Well, what about the normal resistant ride-on for both Wrap and Hyper Beam? Yeah, that would get crushed by Blizzard, which also provided a huge super effective smack against Zapdos and Exeggutor. Dragonite's inherent risk and lack of defensive utility meant it was hard to fit on a team, but it was so devastating if Wrap accuracy cooperated that many players wanted the move banned, and even those that didn't had virulent hatred for it. In GSC, Dragonite was a decent mixed attacker, leveraging its valuable spikes immunity to spread Thunderwave against Zapdos and Raikou for its teammate to take advantage of. It also threatened Snorlax with a hefty dynamic punch that was especially effective alongside paralysis, and ensured Tyranitar wouldn't come anywhere near it, while Ice Beam and Thunder let it threaten other common Pokemon like Exeggutor and Vaporeon. Dragonite's main problem with this set was its lack of reliability, both in how exploitable its quadruple ice weakness was, betraying its solid bulk, and of course the extreme hit-or-miss nature of Dynamic Punch. Still, it had its place. Dragonite could also adopt a pure wall set with Haze, Reflect, Rest, and Sleep Talk. Yes, it couldn't do a single % of damage, but it completely countered Snorlax, as well as other physical threats like Machamp and Marowak, as well as greatly assisting against Vaporeon. It was quite specific, but it did have a place on certain stall teams. In Advanced, Dragonite was entirely outclassed by Salamence. Okay, sure, it had some cool advantages like Focus Punch, Ice Beam, Thunder, Heal Bell, and better special bulk, but none of those were going to make up for the fact that it was weaker, slower, lacked Intimidate, and even lacked Rock Slide, meaning it struggled against Zapdos and Aerodactyl of all things. Dragonite did have some use, but it was incredibly specific and rare. Not bad, but it was a difficult fight when it was usually so much worse than one of the best Pokemon in the game. In DPP, Dragonite was again outclassed by Salamence, until Heart Gold and Soul Silver came along, gifting it extreme speed, which immediately transformed Dragonite into one of the best, most dangerous attacking leads in the metagame. Once Salamence was banned, Dragonite came into its own, filling Mence's shoes with his Dragon Dance and non-lead mixed variants becoming the metagame's new standards. It also utilized an incredibly effective choice band set with an amazingly powerful extreme speed, the Blissey and Clefable KOing utility of superpower, and of course an outrage that smashed its way even through steals. It could also run occasional bulky Dragon Dance sets that let it act as a check to threats like Heatran and Lucario, while potentially even supporting its team with Heal Bell. In Black and White, Dragonite was one of the scariest Pokemon in the game right from the jump. Forget being outclassed by Salamence, Garchomp, Haxorus, or anything else. Dragonite was packing multi-scale, and damage it took at full health being halved made it incredibly difficult to deal with. It mostly made its impact through Choice Band and offensive Dragon Dance sets. The former used its strong extreme speed and great typing to check all manner of weather-related threats, especially those on Sun teams, while Dragon Dance variants were one of the meta's most defining sweepers. However, it had plenty of variation. The bulky Substitute Roost Dragon Dance set in particular was capable of stalling out and setting up against seemingly everything, sweeping entire teams on its own. Meanwhile, mixed sets would occasionally catch opponents by surprise, especially on raid teams where Dragonite could utilize Hurricane and Thunder. Raid Stall also used bulky Dragon Tail Dragonite to counter all manner of threats. Dragonite could feasibly use the Gen 5 VGC, but it generally wasn't. Multiscale wasn't as valuable when you were being targeted by two Pokemon simultaneously, especially with the prominence of spread moves, and thus Dragonite's lower power and speed relative to its fellow dragons was on glaring display. It had a few uses, but nothing spectacular or particularly impressive. In ORAS, Dragonite's outrage spamming tactics were no longer as free thanks to the new fairy types, but it was still a strong Pokemon. Dragon Dance sets were newly ferocious thanks to weakness policy, making Dragonite ridiculously strong if it survived the super effective attack, which thanks to multiscale was its specialty. The substitute Dragon Dance set also returned with a vengeance and was just as terrifying as before, if not more so since it no longer had to deal with the omnipresent permanent stand. It couldn't use Dragon Claw as its mono attacking coverage anymore, but it was just fine using Fly instead, since the 2-turn effect of the move actually helped it gain more passive recovery with leftovers. Dragonite was seen a little in Gen 6 VGC, as weakness policy catapulted its extreme speeds to towering heights, making it a potentially lethal finisher. The problem was that its problems from Gen 5 remained, and if an opponent was hip to the possibility of weakness policy, they'd play around it and Dragonite would struggle to accomplish anything. It had a handful of showings but didn't have any real impact on the metagame. In Sun and Moon, Dragonite dropped to UU for the first time, though that didn't last long at all, as it was quickly banned for leaving the metagame shattered and strewn about in its wake. It was also quite effective in OU, and for the same reasons. With the additions of Z Crystals, its Dragon Dance variant had become far scarier, with its fly turned into a brutal supersonic Sky Strike. It was a specific choice, but highly effective on certain hyper offense teams. Additionally, it wasn't just valued on such teams for its offense, but also for its defensive utility. Its ability to take on Kartana and Astro Ninja was particularly useful. Finally, Dragonite was once again barely passable in Gen 7 VGC, with all the same flaws that usually plagued it. It did have some cool appearances with unusual tricks like Assault Vest and Choice Band. However, overall, dealing with the never-ending barrage of Intimidates from Landorus, and Incineroar really hindered it. One cannot over-exaggerate just how game-changing Generation 8's edition of heavy-duty boots was for Dragonite. Finally, the ability to ignore Stealth Rock and thus take full advantage of its typing and Bulk's superb defensive potential, especially with a multi-scale that would now always be intact. It had the capacity to switch into what felt like the whole tier. Heatran, Blacephalon, Kartana, Rillaboom, Urshifu Rapid Strike, and the V-shaped fire trio of Volcarona, Volcanion, and Victini. Some sets would even go so bulky it could switch into Dragapult. Yes, Dragapult. This was absolutely incredible utility for any team using it. With a pure defensive set, it would bolster its teammates and itself against status via Heal Bell, while acting as one of the best answers to the otherwise incredibly irritating Heatran. In the last move slot, it could pick and choose based on what its team needed, whether it preferred to Ice Beam the likes of Garchomp, Dragapult, and Landorus, or like Flamethrower for Kartana, as well as hitting Melmetal harder. Dragonite wasn't just a hit-taking blob either. It could also pose a defensive threat even when bulked out with its defensive Dragon Dance set. So long as it had Bulk and Roost, it was a great defensive poke and Dragon Dancer alongside its excellent new Flying Stab dual Wing Beat. And the coverage of Earthquake had the potential to take over battles late game, ruthlessly cleaning up the opposition that couldn't punch through its bulk to stop that all-important boosting turn. Of course, Boots enabling multiscale was rife with offensive potential as well, and offensive Dragonite was a strong Pokemon on many hyper offense teams. Sometimes it wouldn't even run the stab of dual Wing Beat, instead preferring the super effective coverage of Ice Punch to more immediately threaten the major targets in Chomp and Lando T. A stabless offensive Dragon Dancer seems like the kind of strange strategy that'd be rare even as far back as before the physical special split. Think Hidden Power Ghost or Rock Gyarados in Advance, for instance. But leave it to Dragonite to make it work in such a modern metagame. Its offensive profile was so good that offensive teams loved it not because it immediately smashed everything in sight, but because of the incredible opportunities it was constantly afforded in order to systematically overwhelm overwhelm the opponent. Dragonite wasn't flawless, it had to avoid the tier's plentiful knockoffs like the plague, as it could not lose its boots ever, and it wasn't especially hard hitting, meaning it could be hard to get some sort of progress going with it. However, overall, Dragonite was a highly valuable, popular, and successful Pokemon in Generation 8 OU. Dragonite wasn't much of a VGC Pokemon in Generation 8. It could ostensibly use Inner Focus, which now had the amazing trait of blocking Intimidate, as well as of course not being flinched by Fake Out. The problem was that Dragonite without Multiscale wasn't a particularly impressive Pokemon, and you didn't need to intimidate it or fake it out to deal with it. Not that they didn't help, of course, but it just meant Dragonite wasn't playing to its true strengths, which weren't that great in a double setting. Anyway, its most notable moment was Sagen Park rocking it en route to 7th place at the Players Cup 25th Anniversary Invitational, running an all-out attacking Life Orb set with dual Wing Beat, Fire Punch, Superpower, and Extreme Speed. Not bad for a Pokemon that otherwise didn't do much of anything at all. So what if Dragonite could further take advantage of his access to the strongest priority move in the game, Extreme Speed, by gaining Stab on it? Game Freak bravely made this theoretical proposal a reality with Gen 9's Terastallization, which Dragonite would not only receive access to this incredible offensive weapon, but also shed its Dragon Flying weakness and become a normal type. Yeah, have fun trying to aim a fighting move at an un-Terra Dragonite. What could possibly go wrong there? Your Great Tusk wouldn't possibly get ruined for such an attempt. Dragon Dance Dragonite with Terra Normal Extreme Speed immediately became one of the most defining Pokemon for Terastallization as a whole. It drew comparisons to none other than the famed extreme killer Arceus, and boy, were they warranted, because it destroyed team after team after team. Air Balloon Golden Go became popular not just because of Great Tusk, but because it helped offense withstand Terra Normal Extreme Speed backed by Earthquake, and it of course had to hold on to that balloon for dear life. The whole effort would be nullified if Dragonite tacked on Fire Punch, which it also enjoyed doing for Corviknight and Scizor. Dragonite's last move generally had flexibility. It greatly enjoyed Ice Spitter, an upgrade over Ice Punch, but could also roost back to multi-skill range, or even encore an opponent into an unfavorable move to create a Dragon Dance opportunity for itself. Oh, that's not all. Dragonite didn't even necessarily need Dragon Dance to unleash Terra Normal Terra on the opponent. A simple Choice Band set did the trick. 0 turns of setup, just immediate blasting away, with a power level that was simply obscene for a priority move. To give you an idea of just how ridiculously powerful it was, it would take out Roaring Moon after Stealth Rock and would one-hit KO a full HP Volcarona outright. Choice Band Dragonite wasn't just an offensive killer either. Its Outrage was also a major asset against bulky teams because it was one of the few physical attacks capable of actually threatening Dondozo. Now, Dragonite wasn't perfect. Being so heavily Terra reliant can sometimes be a problem, as it helps your opponent play around you. They know the Terra will almost certainly be saved for a certain Pokemon, which is majorly helpful, and if that Pokemon doesn't Terra, it's not nearly as scary. Early on, Dragonite was so overwhelmingly powerful, it just about didn't even matter, as it just bulldozed everything in sight. But eventually the player base adjusted, and it couldn't just be spammed mindlessly anymore. Of course, it remained an unbelievably threatening Pokemon. As the metagame has progressed, Dragonite has continued to thrive. Comparatively, it's worse than when the generation started, but that's a really high, arguably unfair bar, considering the immense broken dragons that have been added in more recent times. Gouging Fire, Raging Bolt, Archaludon, Kyurem, and who could forget Baxcalibur's Reign of Terror. Even with these running around though, Dragonite is still a great Pokemon, and honestly, how could it not be when it's got a 120 base power priority move? That is precisely the kind of catch-all blanket check tactic so immensely valuable in attempts to contain a slew of threats dominating a volatile metagame, whether it's Iron Valiant, Rain Spam, or anything else. Dragonite has already helped define Gen 9 and will almost surely continue to succeed throughout the generation. Finally, Dragonite has thrived in VGC in Gen 9. At first, it was using a lot of Terra Flying, which not only removes its infamous Quad Ice weakness, but also gives it an absurdly powerful Terra Blast. Multi-Scale was a lot easier to abuse in a doubles format if you could Terastallize into one type, thereby removing any quadruple weaknesses. And Multi-Scale was also popular early on as the player base thought Intimidate would drop off, funny as that seems now. Dragonite had so many different ways it could spin the rest of its strategy. In Regulation B, it often ran Assault Vest or Lumberry, providing further team utility to its hard-hitting ways, but it could also whip out good old Terra Normal Choice Band, a set that has remained a constant. Regulation C saw it meet its best partner Chien Pao, whose defense-dropping effect was absolutely devastating alongside Dragonite's already scary extreme speeds. As Series D came around, making the return of Landorus, Dragonite shed its attempts at bulk, instead focusing on just hitting as hard as possible, which meant running the Intimidate blocking Inner Focus, even on Assault assault vest sets, and especially on choice band sets. The same inner focus, which of course would also eventually guard it from none other than King Incineroar too. Being immune to Fake Out made Dragonite an excellent lead-off partner alongside Fluttermane, as you'd have 2 Fake Out immunes to start the game. This is what made Dragonite so excellent. It both was a significant part of the metagame, and it was so effective against so many core pieces of the metagame, such as the way it matched up so well against threats like Urshifu Rapid Strike and Ogerpon Wellspring. Plus, while Extreme Speed, Choice Banded, and or Terra Normal in particular was just so good at handling practically everything. As Dragonite has been absolutely everywhere throughout Gen 9 VGC, we have limited its pre-Regulation D placements to first place. Using Dragonite, there were the following achievements. In Regulation A, Luca Paz won the Liverpool Regionals. In Regulation B, with Paradox Pokemon allowed, Abdullah Mohayudin won Vancouver, Gavin Michaels won the Oceania Internationals, Gabriel Agati won the Natal Regionals, and Tehran Birdie won the Perth Regionals. In Regulation B, with the Treasures of Ruins allowed, Haran K won the Trainers Cup, Joaquin Salerno won Sao Paulo and the Buenos Aires Regionals, Tang Shiliang won the Hartford Regionals, Yang Dawei won the Taiwan Regionals, Wayne Yu won the Hong Kong Regionals, and Nico David Cognetta won the Turin Regionals. In Regulation D, Pokemon Home's additions changed the metagame drastically, notably adding Urshifu and Landorus. Dragonite continued to excel, and nobody believed in it more than Riley Factura, who rocked a Terra Normal Assault Vest set en route to placing 16th at the Toronto Regionals, 7th at the Peoria Regionals, and 2nd at the Sacramento Regionals. Additionally, Thiago Latanzi used the hard-hitting Life Orb Terra Normal set to reach 6th at the Curitiba Regionals, while Lille Regionals saw Aurelian Sola place 2nd and Miguel Marti 4th. Then at Worlds, Nicolaj Hoz Nielsen reached 7th using a Life Orb Dragonite, and Federico Camparesi reached 4th with a Choice Bander, and both were Terra Flying. In Regulation E, the Teal Mask metagame, Riley Factura once again reached 4th at the Latin America Internationals and 7th at the San Antonio Regionals, where Joseph Ugarte also reached 4th. At the Winter Festa tournament in Seoul, Kyungmin Jeon reached 4th and Taeyong Kim tied for 6th. At Stuttgart Regionals, Sergio Ramirez reached 3rd, and finally in Regulation F, the Indigo Disc, where Incineroar returned, Alex Underhill and Chip Across reached 1st and 2nd at the Portland Regionals, Sergio Ramirez reached 3rd at the Dortmund Regionals, Joseph Ugarte reached 10th at Knoxville and 14th at the Liverpool Regionals, and Ragav Malavia reached 3rd at the Charlotte Regionals. Dragonite's still going strong in 2024, and we're excited to see where it ends up. And that's it. So how great is Dragonite now actually? Well, it was one of the best abusers of heavy duty boots in Generation 8, an item tailor-made for it to abuse multi-skill to the fullest, unperturbed by the omnipresent annoyance that was Stealth Rock. Its defensive utility was off the charts, helping answer a litany of the scariest threats around, and it could either support the team with Heal Bell or go for late game sweeps with Dragon Dance. Offensive Dragon Dancers were solid too. Then in Generation 9, it became one of the most iconic terrestrialization abusers, one of the Pokemon those players who disliked the mechanic pointed to the most, as it was absolutely perfect at abusing Terra Normal Extreme Speed, whether with Dragon Dance or Choice Band. It simply cleaned house effortlessly and has continued to do so. Terra Normal and Flying have also ensured Dragonite has been a major player in VGC for the first time, and has already seen a great deal of success, and will almost surely continue to. Finally, Dragonite continues to excel in the previous generations as well. Overall, the iconic Gen 1 Pokemon is not just still kicking in Generation 9, it's still kicking everyone's door down and sweeping them off their feet. Without a doubt, Dragonite is still great. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about current Dragonite? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And thank you so much to our Platinum tier patrons. Thank you so much to Raven Daytona Ring, Sorazan Croxon, Stoneface Colin, Bingleton, Ray, Daniel Isbeast, Glitcherton, Alex Sabo, Funky, and Chika Chihyo for their support of our videos. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.